You guys know I'm a Total War fan. I've been playing this series for more than a decade. I started back on Shogun 1. I think Creative Assembly deserves a lot of credit for the release of Total War Warhammer. I think it is a great game. I've already easily justified my purchase of it with 162 hours on record, and many more to come. This is not a hate video, and I'll do my best to avoid ranting, but with the Q&A Creative Assembly released today regarding the upcoming Beastmen DLC, I am officially a little worried about the future of this trilogy, especially when it comes to DLC. Let's be clear, I am not anti-DLC in the slightest. When done right, DLC extends the life cycle of games and adds content that wouldn't have otherwise been in the game at launch. We can argue all day whether this or that should have been in the game from day one. I don't want to get into it, it isn't the point of this video, and frankly, I think a lot of people say, well, this DLC you're releasing 3 months later should have already been there at release, without actually basing that on anything. It's a purely emotional argument, usually not backed up by facts or understanding of the game development process. With that said, consumers absolutely have the right to voice their opinions on stuff like that, even if they don't have access to all that information, because fan furor can absolutely be the impetus for change. I think Creative Assembly has become a lot more transparent and responsive in interacting with the community on the forums and on Reddit, and that's been in direct response to the discussions over Rome 2's launch and the Chaos DLC. So let's get into the meat of this video. Why am I worried about the future of the Warhammer trilogy? Creative Assembly has seen a bit of a furor developing on Reddit and the official forums over the pricing and some other components of the Beastmen DLC. So they released a Q&A post addressing some of those concerns. I will read verbatim straight from Bart's response on the Q&A page. The price is higher than previous large DLCs. What gives? Essentially, Call of the Beastmen required around 3 times more content and effort than previous large DLCs we've done, mainly due to the array of new creature models, animations, art, environments, etc. Not only does it add a new playable race with a bunch of new mechanics to the game, but also adds a Beastmen story campaign on a new map, an eye for an eye. We wanted to do them justice and make them as distinct as the races in the main game, which meant getting a certain amount of content in to hit that quality bar. We've got loads of gameplay coming up next week, so you'll be able to see everything in action, and we will make sure YouTubers will get it early so they can offer you their thoughts too. Okay, so first off, I think there's an important distinction between 3 times more content and 3 times more effort. People in the Total War community love throwing around the word reskin to deflect how much actual work it takes to model a new faction, especially a Warhammer race like the Beastmen or Lizardmen or what have you. I've seen people saying Beastmen are just a reskin of Chaos Warriors, which is false. The Beastmen roster is reskinning the Chaos Giant and taking the Chaos Spawn and Warhounds from the Warriors of Chaos roster, because those are part of the Beastmen army book, so they belong with the Beastmen in this game. But as for the rest of the roster, I don't know if you guys have seen the Warriors of Chaos recently, but I don't remember them being bipedal, ungulate, goat, and bullmen with backward articulating joints. The Beastmen are not a reskin, they have new skeletons and new animations, and don't play like the Warriors of Chaos on the battlefield. So no, they are not a reskin. With that said, this DLC does not have 3 times more content than previous expensive campaign packs for Total War. Look at Caesar and Gaul, look at Hannibal at the Gates. These campaign packs for Rome 2 do not have 3 times less content than Beastmen and a standalone campaign where you can only play as Khazrak the One-Eye. In this campaign, you can't even play as Middenheim or Boris Todbringer with the default Empire roster, and I was honestly hoping to be able to play as them with maybe 2 new units, maybe adding Tübingen Guard and Knights of the White Wolf and a Warrior Priest of Ulrich hero. I think that would have been really cool, made a lot of sense for head-to-head campaigns, and added some more content to this campaign. Apparently, the Eye for an Eye campaign experience is pretty narrative-driven though, so it does make some sense that Beastmen would be the only playable race. We'll see when we get our hands on it how narrative-driven the campaign actually is. Now, do I believe modeling the Beastmen is much more challenging and expensive than creating extra Gallic tribes in something like Caesar and Gaul? Absolutely. The variety and differentiation between Warhammer races is what makes it so appealing. Modeling each race is going to be very expensive and time-consuming, and I perfectly understand that. But just because it requires more work to create, and you subsequently charge a higher price for it, and aptly so, it doesn't mean you're delivering 3 times more actual content. Continuing Bart's post, where are the Gorgons, Jabberslices, and Harpies? As with the other races, we can't include every unit, unfortunately. Mostly this is down to time and cost, and as nearly every unit is unique and often very elaborate, we get to a point where the price for the player just gets too high. For example, adding the Jabberslice alone would have been as costly as all the artwork that went into Charlemagne. Okay. I have no idea what the art for Charlemagne cost to create, so that doesn't really mean a whole lot to me. But dragons and chimeras probably cost a pretty similar amount of money to create and model, and we have those in a game with 5.5 races currently that sits at $60. On top of that, we have giants and chaos spawn and hippogriffs and griffins and a bunch of other unique units and monsters for the base price of a standard PC game. But as he continues, we're always looking to get the balance right though, and we'll be looking at all the feedback. Can't I have them the new units rather than the new campaign? Bart says, while that might seem obvious, it's not an even trade for us given the different members of the team available. Campaign map artists and character modelers are different people, for example, and we took the decision that adding a significant chunk of new gameplay with a new campaign would be worth more to players in the end. Judging the balance of content is always something we're looking at though, so it'll be interesting to see what players make of it. End quote. Okay. So it looks like we will not be getting the Gorgon, the Jabberslice, the Harpies, the Doombull, or the Tuskgore Chariot at the time of the DLC release. Perhaps they will be added later down the line as free DLC, maybe even with Morgor the Shadowgave as the 3rd legendary lord for the Beastmen, alongside the Wood Elves DLC. Who knows? No confirmation one way or the other, but it's worrisome because they explicitly state in this post that adding those units would have been too expensive. So I'm not sure why they would later on down the line give us free LC units when they're already saying it's too expensive for them to add. I'm not really sure. Maybe they'll be able to do it later on down the line. But here are my thoughts on this. I honestly think this is a very different problem than other races missing units because, number one, the Beastmen are being charged for at a premium DLC price. This is the most expensive DLC CA has ever put out, to my knowledge, barring actual game expansions like Fall of the Samurai. I am perfectly cool with expensive DLC. I am fine with paying that price, but please give me the full roster. Don't leave out 5+ important units that make the faction what it is. And number two, because the Beastmen have such a small roster. Right now, they're literally missing 25% of their already small army book. I don't have a problem with being charged a premium price for a product, but if I'm going to pay that money, I expect premium quality. Say that 5 times fast. And I don't find stripping out 5 unique units that make the Beastmen, especially when they have such a small army book, a good play or something that demonstrates premium quality. This is different to me than Chaos Warriors or Empire missing units because those rosters are much bigger. In fact, in the Warriors of Chaos example, their roster is massive. With Warriors of Chaos, like I said, their army book is huge. And I can understand them missing some units, but Chaos is also a faction that will for sure be expanded upon as the trilogy moves forward to encompass god-specific marks and units like Skullcrushers of Khorne. But Beastmen? Maybe not gonna get expanded upon. High Elves? Maybe not gonna get expanded upon. I don't know. What I fear is unfinished rosters for DLC that are charged at a premium price. I'm imagining right now Lizardmen without Carnosaurs, Skaven without Hellpit Abominations that can die and then resurrect for a second life 25% of the time, super awesome monster unit, Ogres without Stonehorns or Mournfang Cavalry, High Elves without Phoenixes, Dark Elves without Hydras. If expensively priced DLC that is on the top of the bestsellers list currently, and TW Warhammer, which sold better and faster than any other TW game in history, isn't enough to cover the price of and add 2 to 3 important and unique Beastmen units, then I have serious fears about CA's ability to do justice to the bigger factions that will come later down the line. The units are what make Warhammer what it is, why the franchise is so popular. If you start stripping the most iconic and unique units out of each Warhammer faction, you're going to find a lot less people want to play your game. That's why I'm a little nervous for the future. Every player has a favorite race or three, and mine haven't come yet. High Elves and Skaven are obviously on that list. It would absolutely suck to finally get your favorite Warhammer faction in Total War, which, by the way, some people have waited more than a decade for that opportunity, just to find out your favorite units aren't in the game. There are already 2 other factions with giants in Total War Warhammer right now. Taking that Beastmen giant reskin out and replacing it with the more beast-like and more unique Gorgon would have been a better move, in my opinion, if they had to choose one or the other, which I'm not exactly buying right now. It functions similarly to a giant, but has unique gameplay mechanics and a more unique model. Gorgon is faster moving than a giant and replenishes HP while killing enemies. Also has Frenzy and Blood Greed, so it has some unique mechanics. I think that would have been a better choice than reskinning the giant and adding that in. Now, of course, reskinning the giant from Chaos and Greenskin roster is easier and it costs less money, so I understand if money's the issue, it makes sense. But at the same time, reskinning still costs money. You strip that, you add the Gorgon, you have a more unique Beastman unit in the Beastman roster. But here are my final points. Creative Assembly already explicitly said that TW Warhammer sold so well, they will be dramatically expanding the scope of the trilogy and the content they had planned. Those were their exact words. They're charging a premium price for this DLC, and I'm fine with that, perfectly fine with it, if CA is willing to give me premium quality. But missing 25% of a very small army book is not premium quality, in my opinion, and it doesn't jive with how well TW Warhammer sold, or what they said about expanding the scope of what they had planned for the trilogy. Let's be clear, I'm a Total War YouTuber. I will either be getting this DLC gifted to me, or I will buy it myself. There is no chance I won't be creating content for it. I really like the Beastmen. I like their playstyle. Their current roster still has some really cool units in it, and the race has some great gameplay mechanics I look forward to trying out in battle and on the campaign map. And Creative Assembly has done a fantastic job with this game so far, despite some things that I would consider missteps like siege battle gameplay. I really do think this game is well worth its money, and commend them for their hard work thus far. I think they need to do a better job prioritizing which units are important to a roster if they're going to cut units, but especially for army books as small as the Beastmen's, it leaves a bitter taste in my mouth seeing so much uniqueness and variety cut. 25% of the roster. Some of these army books coming up are huge. It will be a real shame if iconic units are dropped and people don't get to see their favorite models brought to life in Total War Warhammer. As we move forward, I would love to continue to see good quality DLC and content creation that will expand this trilogy into a legendary series of games, and I am willing to pay for it. I have faith in Creative Assembly that they can deliver that. It's been a good start thus far, and I appreciate the hard work of each and every CA employee who has dedicated their time to bringing the Warhammer world to life. Let's be civil in the comments section. You have every right to believe the army rosters released so far are great and worth your money, but you also have every right to level legitimate criticisms if there's something you aren't happy about. Just try to keep it civil in the comments section. I look forward to reading your opinions. Talk to you next time. Indie Pride, signing out.